Right. All right, y'all. All right, what's going on, everybody? Let's go ahead, go live in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's go. What's going on, everyone? Yes, to those of you that were hanging out in the room with us, I was bumping some Sidhu Mooseala. Rest in peace, Sidhu Mooseala. He was killed earlier this week in Punjab. Definitely lost a great member of the community. Like, he's kind of like a bit of a revolutionary, kind of fought for the rights of Punjabis in Punjab, because we are a bit mistreated out there. But nevertheless, great music. Definitely check him out. Sidhu Mooseala. He's dope. One of my favorite Punjabi rappers. That being said, y'all, thank you so much for being here. It is Friday, June 3rd, 2022. We're back with Artist Data Science Happy Hour number 84. Damn, 84 weeks of this stuff, man. That shit is crazy. We've been doing this for quite some time. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you all for joining. I hope you get a chance to tune into the episode that was released in the podcast today. I did an episode with Jeremy Adamson, and we talked about his book, which was pretty much centered around the theme of how to build and lead data science teams. Definitely recommend that book, especially if you're looking to get into a leadership position, or maybe you've recently found yourself in a leadership position. This is an episode that you do not want to miss. Also, last week's episode was with none other than Nick Singh. We talked about his book, How to Ace the Data Science Interview. So if you are in the interview process, if you're currently interviewing, definitely check that out. I gave him a little bit of I gave him my pitch, like kind of my tell me about yourself in that interview, and he broke it down and deconstructed it and told me what I was doing right, what I was doing wrong. It was great. So definitely check out that interview. I think you guys will enjoy that. A couple of weeks prior to that, did an episode with David Spiegelhalter talking about the art of statistics. So definitely check that out as well. Huge shout out to our sponsors for this week's episode. It is happening right around the corner. We've only got a few days left. June 8th, 9th, and 10th in Toronto. It is the 2022 MLOps World Conference, Machine Learning in Production. Definitely check this out. If you're in Toronto, I'll be there as well. Come say hi. I'll be at the Pachyderm booth. I'll also be walking around the floor and checking out as many talks as I can. I'm looking forward to meeting a lot of cool people there. I know a lot of community members from the MLOps community that will be there. Shout out to Dimitrios. He'll be in the building. I think Makiko will be there as well. So I'm looking forward to hanging out with you again, Makiko. But yeah, if you're interested in AI in production, benchmarks, lessons learned from the field, then this an opportunity that's going to be right up your alley. You are going to definitely enjoy this talk. They've got a lot of talks from people from a lot of awesome companies: Meta, Shopify, Hugging Face, Spotify, Tecton, eBay, Lyft, DoorDash, Vanguard, Pinterest, and of course, the company I currently work at, Pachyderm. They're going to be talking about a whole bunch of different topics in these talks, talking about engineering for foundational models to production, a bunch of stuff on Kubernetes, how to build an MLOps platform from scratch as well. So definitely check that out. There's also a free aspect of the conference. Now, the free aspect is for the demo day and career fair in the exhibition hall. So that's happening June 9th at 4:30 p.m. Eastern time. So this is an opportunity for you to just kind of check out what products other companies are kind of building. And if you're anything like me, like I'm a product head. I love playing with product. I absolutely love playing with products. So it's always a lot of fun to go to these demo days and see what people are doing in the space. A good way to kind of just put up your general knowledge. So definitely check that out. The MLOps World Conference. Huge shout out. They've been sponsoring the podcast all month, so I appreciate you guys' support. Shout out to everybody in the room. Shout out to Deli in the building. Shout out to what's going on. Makiko, Gina, Vin is in the house. Russell, Avery Smith, Eric, Tom, Ives, Murillo. Good to see y'all there. Vin is asking the question, wait, we have to put our stuff into production? Yeah, so let's talk about that, Vin. You made I think a post earlier today, or maybe it was yesterday, when you're talking about there's a lot of people telling you how to build a model, but not a lot of people telling you why you should build a model. I know it's kind of tangential to that question. Maybe we'll circle back to just having to put stuff in production. But let's talk about that. Let's take that off. Why is it that we need to build models? Why is that we need to build models? And if you guys have questions, whether you're watching on LinkedIn, on YouTube, or even right here in the Zoom room, if you got questions, please do let me know. I will add you to the queue. And we'll get to your questions. I know Avery has a question as well, so I'm happy to get to Avery's question after this, if you don't mind. If you're in a rush, we'll go ahead and get to your
Let me get to it? Is that what you said?
Well, if you're in a rush, we can get to your question first.
Oh, no, I'm not in a rush. I'm just hanging out.
Okay, cool. Yeah, cool, perfect. So then, let's go over it, man. Let's talk about, first of all, why are there so many people telling us how to build models, but not enough telling us why we should build models?
I think the first one's easier. And like as crazy hard as what we do is, I think it's easier to explain how to build because you don't have to have sort of this concept of an end product if you're not talking about why. So I think that's the biggest, for us, that's our biggest gap in the field, is that we talk about what to build. And if you really have that kind of mindset, the academic mindset, which is good because I mean, if we didn't have academics, we wouldn't have a job. So academia is really important, but at the same time, once you leave academia, you come into the business world. Now we have to develop something with value. We have customers, we have users, we have stakeholders, we have people that actually want money. I mean, I'm sorry, we have greedy people that enjoy making cash, and so they pay our salaries, and so we kind of have to deliver some value to them. So all of that changes the way data science works, because now it's like, okay, don't just throw data at every problem, and you start whittling down what kind of problems do you have to use data on, and it's a pretty small list. And then you go like one step further down the ladder and you say, how many problems do you really need to use models for? It's even smaller. And then you get into deep learning and like the really complex, there's, I don't know, 2%, 5% of all business problems might need deep learning, if that. But I think we spend like an exorbitant amount of time focused on building increasingly complex deep learning models, because there's a perception that we have actual problems that those can solve when we really don't. We don't have a whole lot of, society big problems that need deep learning at this point. And so the use cases are pretty limited when it comes to value. So that's why I think it's, we talk more about how to build rather than what to build and why. Like I said, it's just because it's easier. And I remember seeing I can't remember whose tweet it is, but they were talking about how just vanishingly small the Venn diagram between strategists and technologists really is. I think it was Jim Breyer was talking about at Davos, how he prefers to invest in technical strategists, because if you look at the heart of the largest companies, the most successful tech companies, they all have a technical strategist at the very top of the company. And so that's really, and there are just so few.
Vin, thank you very much. Let's go to Makiko. Then after Makiko, let's go to Shantana, and shout out to Joe Reese in the building. Joe Reese, good to see you. Matt Housley as well. Good to see both of y'all.
Good to see you last week, by the way.
Yeah, it was, man. It's cool hanging out with you, man. Also, Mark Laney in the building. Good to see you here as well. Makiko, go for it.
So this is my thing, because this was a question I actually posed to Joe and Matt earlier this morning, which was like, of the problems that exist right now, like for example, in the MLOps world, like how many of them are pure like problems due to ML versus like problems involving software engineering, right? Like how many of them are problems that are unique to machine learning projects versus like they've been solved, and it's almost more a question of like, has that knowledge actually been propagated and like adopted, and is it relevant to like different groups? So for example, like at Intuit, they have a very specific like enterprisey mindset for kind of how architecture is built there. And a lot of times when I was looking at, so we had like a global hackathon and we were seeing these presentations, and I was looking at a lot of that, I'm like, that is like a different grade of problem than we are having or that we're trying to solve for like in the MailChimp unit, where it's like we're almost not super concerned, like we're not looking at the efficiency of like auto scaling versus not auto scaling. We just kind of assume that we should just do it because like we just don't have the energy and headcount to kind of waste our sort of resources on that question. But to me, it's kind of curious that like I feel like a lot of what I see in like the MLOps world, and I'm not sure if this is true in the data engineering world or in the data strategy world, I kind of hear a lot of it. I'm like, okay, I don't know if this is like actually a problem, or if this is just like, let's try to like get money back off of this really big like deep learning model that we trained and see if we can monetize it, or let's see if we can monetize this like other thing that maybe is only relevant to like 5 or 10% of people. And this is something that I think about a lot because yeah, like I think especially like if you're trying to like learn to become like an ML engineer or an MLOps engineer, it's like really crowded and noisy right now because I can't tell like what's actually important and relevant versus like what is like an extremely specialized like niche use case.
Mikiko, thank you so much. Also, Mikiko got a YouTube channel that he just launched. Mikiko Bazeli, the MLOps engineer. Definitely check that out. Mikiko, if you want to shout a link out, put it right here in the chat. I'll be sure to include it in the show notes as well as post it on LinkedIn. You guys check out Mikiko's stuff. Go for it, Mikiko.
Sorry, no, I was just trying to do like the party emoji. Oh, it was the wrong one. Sorry, yeah, I don't have any birthday.
All good. Well, yeah. So let's go to Shantanu. I'd love to hear from you on this one. Then we'll go to Avery. I think that was a hand up from Avery. Shantanu, go for it.
Sure. I mean, for the new folks at the table, and definitely not for me. Could we repeat the question?
Yeah, absolutely. So the question, Vin made a post that I liked. I thought it was an interesting post. And it was essentially, we have too many people teaching you how to build a model, not enough people teaching you why you should build a model. So I guess the question now you could answer is one of two questions. You could either answer the question, why is that the case? Or the question, why do we build models? Or why should we build a model?
I think that second one is too philosophical.
I like a good philosophical discussion, though. I like that one. But yeah, go for it. Yeah, whichever one you like to.
That's how we understand the world, right? Is by having models of how it works. I feel like Vin and Mikiko were both giving answers at a level that I'm not going to be able to get to. But I'll say the following. So, what Mikiko was saying reminded me of, I was listening to Joe's live earlier. I think Jordan was the name of the person who was on, and yeah, he was saying something around down the lines of, you don't have big data until you spend more time thinking about how to efficiently process the data than actually just storing everything, and that's cheaper. I'm paraphrasing it, but that was the gist of it. Which is what Mikiko was saying too, right? In the world of ML and ML ops is, I think there is a big trend right now of adopting machine learning operations, and it's not always warranted. I still think that's kind of like a tangent. I think the reason no one tells you why you're building models is because no one, it's not a one specific problem. It's not a problem that someone else can solve for you, right? Then like they're doing your job, and it's not something you can address generally and say, oh, this is the reason to do, other than, yes, I mean, we build models so that we can understand, how our users behave or XYZ. So it's like, it's much easier to talk about, well, once you have a model, that does XYZ, then this is what you can do to make it more robust, which is a totally valid thing, right? I mean, like this is, it's good to know the best practices around, how you have a model serve its proposed value sustainably and, in perpetuity and so on and so forth. But I think that no one can tell you in too much depth how to build a model, because each case is so different.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Joe, let's hear from you. By the way, if you're watching on YouTube or if you're watching on LinkedIn, and I know there's nobody watching on Twitch, even though streaming there, but if you have questions, please let me know. You can drop your question right there in the comment section or in the live chat section on YouTube. If you're in the room and you've got a question, just go ahead and let me know, and I will be sure to add you to the queue. Joe, go for it.
Matt?
Yeah, so I recently was looking at some of the reviews for Zhamak's book on data mesh. And one of the reviews said, yeah, this is interesting. There's some cool technical stuff in here, but the book kind of gets off track on talking about organizations and like how to work with people. And I feel like all of these data disciplines have this problem where, first of all, we all really love the technical, like problem solving stuff. Kind of people who like played chess growing up, we like very well-defined rules. The kind of people who did math, we like to program. We even things like MLOps, like we're given this roadmap to define how to do something. And the second problem is that teaching more the organizational behavior and business value of data is much, much harder. It's like a really tough problem. And I feel like maybe in general, we just need to emphasize that more, like teaching people how to work in an organization, what the business value of data is, without them actually having to get that first job to do it. I feel like this is a huge chicken and egg problem for getting the first job, that even I, as a hiring manager, if I find a really talented candidate, but they don't have any experience, I don't want to hire them because I don't know how they're going to work with my team. And so I don't know if you can crack that problem. Like that'd be a huge contribution to education for data scientists, data engineers. And
well, I mean, it's kind of like, I think there's a lot of data science LARPing, so I mean, you're kind of going through the motions of building models and all this stuff, but it's kind of, at the end of the day, it's like a pointless exercise if it's not doing anything. But I think a LARP is actually really, we were talking about LARPs on a walk just a bit ago, and how, I don't know how we got on this topic. It's typical Joe and Matt rant. But no, it does remind me a lot of that, though, where it's like everything is sort of a facsimile, and there's a lot of ceremony behind it. Like, oh, you have to be good at building models, but I don't know. There's as data scientists, you find that there's a lot of other things you could do too. So, live action role playing, right? Yes, LARP, that LARP.
Live action role playing. So, nice. Yeah, I feel like that's something that we have talked about previously on the show as well with Joe. Joe, see the life of Joe LARPer. Does that exist?
Yeah, I'm gonna go do some medieval LARPing after this. So yeah, cosplay data science. Yeah, exactly. Ben, it's awesome.
Miki, go for it. Again, Joe, it was awesome hanging out with you last week too, man. We had a good time. Miki, go for it.
Yeah, it was interesting because back when like I was mentoring like Harpreet, like with you over at Data Science Dream Job, right? And like whenever I would hit, like we would get questions, right, where people were like, is there a book on like sales analytics or like marketing analytics? Like we'd get that question all the time, right? Like, could you help us find content geared towards like data scientists for sales and marketing? And it was kind of like, well, part of it is you do have to actually kind of live in their domain a little bit, like, or like, timeshare, I guess. You don't have to live there. You just timeshare, like, at a place in like Lake Tahoe or something, right? And like, I think it is one of those things where, I mean, there's two things that I'm kind of wondering. Like, one is the sort of dependent on like the influence and how much of a seat you have at the table, and how does that correspond with like company maturity and size? Because like when I was working for like smaller startups, it was relatively easier to get like a seat at the table to kind of influence product decisions. But I feel like sometimes in bigger companies, like you essentially have like, especially the matrix company, where you're like part of a squad, or I don't know, there's other fancy terms for it, right? Besides squad or pod or whatever. Like a lot of times, like what's the kind of pushback if the incentives are to just sort of like deliver stuff, like irrespective of like the actual impact. And I kind of like wonder about that. And the other aspect too of the whole like getting domain knowledge, I feel like all the domain knowledge I had, right, like working in like real estate tech, working in solar, working on sales and marketing analytics, like I kind of had to get through like working directly with the business partner and like sitting and living in their meetings and doing a lot of like reading in like I don't know, like the revenue ops groups or whatever on LinkedIn, right? But it does feel like sometimes people sort of don't want to do that. But I don't know.
Kiko, thank you very much. Anybody else want to chime in here? If not, we can go to Avery's question. I'll give it going once, going twice.
Quickly, I'll just quickly, like, I'm not entirely sure. You should do analytics on who the audience is for these happy hours. But if there are some, really early career folks, and by that I mean like sort of in college and stuff, the way you learn how to build models is, what you're really learning is how to solve problems. So you should major in physics.
Yes, I absolutely agree with that. That's what I was originally wanting to major in, but then I realized I was not smart enough for that. Tom, let's hear from you. Tom is also a physicist.
Real quick, well, it's actually multi-physical engineering, but officially mechanical engineering, but it doesn't describe me. So I love this topic, by the way, because I don't think we ask, why are we modeling? And actually, I think it's more about return on data. You've got to be in a very rigorous collaboration with your organizational counterparts, your stakeholders, your internal customers, your external customers, whatever. And you got to figure out, how do we use data that we have on hand to improve this situation? That could be done with a dashboard or a one-off data story. And in fact, if we would do a better job at those things, we probably would be doing a better job in the data pipelines that lead to predictive modeling. But I think it's wise not to rush to predictive modeling. In fact, while you're developing your pipeline, and I've said this many times, even on this show, just getting a Pareto of feature weights for the problem you're looking at, that's probably more valuable to the business than having the actual predictions, because they can act proactively on understanding those feature weights. And we have to take a real strong responsibility to make what we do clearer to the business side. They don't have to learn how to do what we do, but they should learn, we should help them understand the insights we gain from doing that work. So again, to summarize what I'm getting at is return on data. When the next time I hear how many machine learning models get into production, I'm going to just say, who effing cares? Would you stop asking that? How much return are we getting on our data assets? Now I will be quiet because you might have to mute me if I don't.
Tom, thank you very much. I love it, appreciate it. Let's go, if nobody else has anything to input here, we can go to Avery's question. By the way, those of you watching on YouTube or on LinkedIn, if you do have a question, go ahead and put it right there in the comment section or in the chat section. If you'd like to get access to the room, send me a message. I'll send you a link to the Zoom room. Avery, go for it.
Okay, sweet. Thanks for letting me ask my question. My question is something that maybe doesn't get asked as much in these happy hours. It's a little bit more, I guess, business intelligence-y, less data science-y. And actually, really, it's more operations research, which is like a field of data science that just doesn't get touched on very often, albeit there's actually like a lot of jobs and a lot of business need for just operations research. So doing optimizations and simulations, I think is a little underrated. Like everyone likes to create models, right? But creating some sort of optimization framework can actually help really do more diagnostic analytics and solve business problems. And so recently I've been been tasked. I have this huge data set that it's really just the results of a very large optimization. So picture, it's really in manufacturing. So picture, thousands of sensors, or not sensors, but thousands of different levers that you could maneuver. You could raise your temperature on one reactor, lower the pressure on another. And there's literally thousands of variables, parameters for this optimization problem. And they all have constraints. They have like a minimum constraint and a maximum constraint. And then most of it is an LP, so linear program. So it solves to maximize some sort of value. Usually it's money, because we live in America, and that's what we like in America, is maximizing money. So I get the results of this optimization, and it's like 1,000 variables. And basically you have those 1,000 variables, the min value, the max value, and where it actually landed. And one thing that I've had a trouble doing is, how do you visualize 1,000 different data points effectively? Specifically because it's not really, I don't think it is multivariate, because there is lots of variables, but it's not like I have, for one run of the optimization, for example, you don't have two different temperatures. It only fixed to one value temperature. But how do you display 1,000 different, metrics to a user at once? I'll open it up from there. But right now they're doing it's just a table, and it's kind of messy. So I'm open to ideas. Thoughts?
First instinct, I would say, why would you put that much data in front of somebody's face? 1,000 different metrics in front of someone at once. Like that's a lot for like a human to ingest. And the first thing I would do is, okay, let's say if we're interested in moving this one particular lever, then do we know what other levers move the most when we move this one? And if so, can we hold, I don't know, hold fixed doesn't make sense, but can we just display those, right? Like, oh, I'm interested in lever A. And I know that lever A is really correlated, using that word, loosely, with levers B, C, and D. And then just visualize those together. Or you can just put it all into an auto encoder, reduce the dimensionality, get down to a few dimensions, and visualize that maybe. But let's go to Joe for this one. And if anybody has the insight here, we'd absolutely love to hear from you.
I guess I need to ask, like, what action are you trying to drive with this visualization?
That's a very good question. Most of the time it's used, so they use this table to check one of the 1,000 different values. They have things that the user has things that they care about that I might not necessarily know about. But at the end of the day, it's basically used to try to run your manufacturing plant at optimized conditions. So for instance, the temperature of this reactor should be around 100 degrees. And that'll be one of the results that comes back to you from this optimization solution. So
is this like a what or a when type problem? Like I'm describing like what happens at a certain time.
Yeah.
If it exceeds a certain boundary, then I'm, a condition, then I need to take an action on that. Is that sort of what's going on?
I'll just be very explicit. It's really for deciding how to run a refinery. My background's in oil and gas.
Yeah.
And so it's like, what crude oil should we buy and what products should we make them into, and what temperature should we run our reactors at? It's much more complex than that. At the end of the day, the people looking at those solutions are mainly answering those three questions.
Yeah. I don't know. I'll just say, like, in situations like that, because I used to, I could have experience in factories and that kind of stuff. Like, I would always just make basically a really simple control chart. That's it. So just what are my upper and lower bounds? If it exceeds it, take an action. Ideally, automate it so you don't even have to intervene, right? So that's the other piece of it. Like, I'm a huge fan of, like, if it's a what or a when type question, a report's great. Automating a response to that is better.
Yeah. So. To what extent? It sounds like people want visualizations so a human can make the decision. The question is, can you, like Joe was saying, come up with a model that will just give you the answer? And then the next question is, do you need explainability with that, which has become a big issue in data science and machine learning? And then maybe the visualization is now focused just on explainability rather than on making the decision.
But even with this data set, it's 1,000 variables, you said, or something like that. I mean, I'd really just try and focus on what are the ones that are useful to you, and probably just reduce the problem that way. I mean, maybe you may not even need to do anything like PCA or anything. It might just be like, yeah, this is what's driving everything. So we'll just look at that. So I mean, the problem with this kind of thing too is you get overcomplicated and then you get false signal. So
the interesting thing, like if you look at like dimensionality reduction, something like PCA, and going back to what Harpreet said at the beginning, one thing to think about is this isn't a time series. It's not like you have like in a control chart where you have like multiple values inside of a range. It's like, here's the minimum and the maximum value that we can possibly operate at. Where should we operate at? It's like almost univariate analysis. Like it's one data point for every like dimension we have. And right now I'm not thinking about running it multiple times, although what Harpreet said, I think is really important. I think where it actually gets interesting is when you run it multiple times, but initially they just run it once. It says the reactor for this temperature is this. The pressure for this reactor is this. The problem is there's just a lot of thises, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, sorry, Makiko.
So I remember that we were doing like a problem like this in like the supply chain OR class that I was taking. And it's like, the way they were describing it's like it's a multi-integer like linear programming problem where you're trying to like, you have certain inputs and based off some kind of cost function constraints, you're trying to like find this like optimal combination of the different variables. I don't know if you'd still want to visualize that though, to be honest, unless it's like the visualization is to help like justify the calculation. But I think in terms of actually solving it, right? Like there's definitely some examples out there that I can go search and like link. I remember because the sample case we were doing was literally like oil in like refineries. So that's the only reason why I remember this. But in terms of like kind of visualization and communicating it, I still kind of feel like you're not going to be able to like visualize it the way you would in Tableau unless it's like literally as the table of inputs and like the optimization function and like what the actual result ends up being. But this is as someone who is terrible at statistics. And I only remember this because I thought it was really fun. And you could do it in Excel, which I thought was pretty cool. But yeah, so just agreeing with Joe, I don't know if you'd really want to put that many like variables.
I mean, with 1,000 variables though, I'm just wondering, like, because the whole point of making a visualization is so you can convey information that hopefully is actionable, right? I'm just wondering, like, what are you trying to drive with this at the end of the day?
Yeah, and I think like calculating the solution is different, right, from communicating the information. Like, I think the calculating the solution is straightforward. I don't necessarily know the information, right, Avery, that you would want to convey or the story you'd want to tell. Besides, this is like how it works.
Let's go to oh, sorry.
No, but I think you're exactly right that I can basically what they have right now is just a table and it's a really long table, right? And it shows the lower boundary, the upper boundary, and then where it's solved to, as well as kind of a it's called like a marginal value, and that is like if it's at a boundary, how much benefit would you get theoretically by expanding that boundary? But I kind of agree that it's kind of a factor of what Joe talked about, trying to decide what's actually important, right? And telling the story of that individual part of the story. And then also maybe giving them access to all the variables like they have now in the table. So anyways, I appreciate you guys' feedback.
Vin, go for it. Let's go to Vin, and then Russell, if you got anything to add, let me know. I think you had some comment there. And then after Russell, we can hear from Tom and Champma. If you have anything to add to this, let me know. Or if anybody has anything to add, just go ahead and raise your hand, and I will get to you. But then after Avery's question, we'll get to Mark's question. Again, if you have a question, please do let me know in the comments, in the chats, wherever you're at. I'll be sure to get to you. Vin, go for it.
Yeah, I saw something. It just kind of triggered a memory in me a few minutes ago. It was designed for hypersonic flight, where it was a really similar problem, where there was like a ton. And I can't remember where I saw this at. I'm like remembering an old video or something like that. but they had it was basically just like a target in the middle of the screen. And instead of showing you all the variables, behind the scenes, you could pick the variables that mattered to you, and it would just move crosshairs. It was like the simplest thing I've ever seen. It would just move crosshairs, and then it would tell you why it moved. It would basically explain, and this is why. If you move these few things, this is why. If you change these few things, here's, where you are from optimal, or from whatever you care about as optimal. And here's why. It was like this dummy simple. It just kind of triggered in my head. It might be a way, or at least give you some place to start at for a visualization, where it totally obscured everything. It basically assumed you knew variable wise, because it sounds like your group knows what variables they care about and what they care about from an optimization standpoint. And so if they can put those two things in, really all you need to do is kind of like what Joe was saying, to the explainability side of it, and to the how close to optimal, what would this change? How close to your optimum would it be? And that's basically the target in the middle. You've just got a crosshair moving around. If you change this to this, what does it do? And people's heuristics tend to take over from there. I remember that's what they said, was essentially, as soon as people understood the relationships between a couple of different variables or a few different variables, they were able to make better decisions. And so that's how they ended up visualizing, like, if you changed this, here's what it would do to, aerodynamics, or here's what it would do to top speed, or here's what it would do to friction. I mean, just like this insane number of variables. And so that's how they handled it.
Ben, thank you very much. Tom, let's go to you. And then after Tom, Shantanu, if you got anything to add, let me know. And then we'll go to Mark.
So Avery, I would enjoy doing this with you offline, but I think the 1,000 variables for some, this is a refinery type thing, or a big chemical process, right? Yeah, it kind of makes sense now, but it would be a brutal process, but it's necessary. Start looking at what you can reduce through, first you scale, then you look for collinearity. It doesn't mean you take away all the collinearity, but it's instructive. Because if you can keep the strongest collinear variable of a group of collinearity, of features that have collinearity, now you've done some feature reduction. And some people were spot on. PCA is a great way to reduce the complexity, but it doesn't really. A lot of people don't remember that, oh, just because I can take away some PCA features, that doesn't mean I've reduced the number of features in original space. I still have the responsibility to say, okay, we're now using these PCA features, but each of them relate to these combinations back to the original space. But you go through these, and then I'm sure, even if you get very little feature reduction, you want to add a lot of feature engineering to those 1,000 variables. I am, of course, joking, but it could be that once you do the feature engineering, you find some amazingly rich features that will allow you to do even more feature reduction. And now you can go with some new explainable AI to the group. But the thing I most wanted to encourage you to do, map out what you're currently doing and point out to them, this is going to be a multi-generational process to get to better and better models. And you should pay me millions of dollars over the next few years to answer it for you, because it will be hard. And no one's quite as smart as me and able to do this with my domain knowledge and my machine learning skills. Yes.
So pay you $1 million over the next 5 years.
I was speaking as Avery, not as Tom Ives, just so everyone knows.
Tom, thank you very much. Avery, I was doing a bit of quick research. I sent you this paper. It's called OPT-map, OPT map, and it's using dense maps for visualizing multi-dimensional optimization problems. Like, I'm hoping there's code in here somewhere. I didn't look at it, but I just saw like one page with really nice graphs that might be helpful. So check that out. Let's go to Mark, and then let's go to Russell. If anybody else has anything to add to this topic, do let me know. Otherwise, we'll go from Mark's comment here to Russell, and then back to Mark for his question.
Hey, so I think I picked up enough context from listening to everyone, and this is more so kind of like brainstorming outside the box kind of thing applying to this, and more so thinking about like my social sciences brain applying to your very engineering focused thing. But one of the key things is like, all right, you have 1,000 variables, which is a lot. But also it seems like there's this component of like there's a lot of interactions between these variables, hence why it's very important that you keep track of them. And so you're trying to reduce, right? So Tom definitely talked about multicollinearity. That's a mouthful, which I think is like a really cool thing. Also, feature engineering. I don't know if this will apply to this, but my mind immediately went when thinking about interactions like mediation analysis. So, and this is like trying to draw back from grad school, but you say, you know, A causes C, but between A and C, there's B, and as there's some interaction happening there. And so my thought process is if you did some mediation analysis, maybe there's different stakeholders, or maybe there's certain components of all those 1,000 variables that are important to understanding your outcome. And depending on which outcome or which variable you're focused with, maybe that mediation analysis could point you to the right variables that are most important for that subset as a way to like kind of logically. Again, I don't know if this could be applied to this space because I've only really seen it for like social sciences. And I'm thinking way back to grad school, but just something out there to think about how to account for interactions.
Mark, thank you. Let's go to Russell and then Shantanu.
Thanks, Harpreet. So I think Tom and Vin and Mark have pretty much touched on everything I wanted to say. But I was just going to suggest, 1,000 variables, it's a huge amount. I would, if you can, separate those from the data altogether and map out the variables alone. So identify a network relationship map of the variables. So you can identify the binary collinearities, the multi-collinearities, the contra-linearities, inverse proportionalities, and absolute conflicts, etc. And perhaps think about it like a 1,000 track mixing desk for those that like music or DJing. So if you put something up, it's going to have an effect on everything else there. And some of the automated routines I have in those desks, you put one thing up and it moves another one down. So understand what that map is. So when you do put it onto the model, and I can see Joe laughing at me here. Have I got the mixing desk wrong?
No. We're just noticing your video. It always stretches out, so you get like this time warp Russell or something. It's kind of funny. So
a bit like Max Headroom for anyone from the 80s. So map that out so you can give it to anyone that's going to then digest the outputs or the data from the model so that they can understand if they change variable A and variable B will naturally be affected by it or completely blocked out, that they understand that happens and are not surprised at the effect in the output.
Russell,
and I probably
still there?
Yeah, I was just going to say apologies to Joe because I can see he's got some real good mixing equipment there, and I probably completely murdered my.
No, you got it right, man. It's all good. I mean, you're from the UK. Everyone, they're DJs and stuff. So
that is actually a true fact. It's what stereotype, Joe? Back from the UK DJs. Shantanu, go for it. And then after Shantanu, we'll circle back to Mark's question. Go for it, Shantanu.
Yeah, I mean, I could ask a lot of different questions before trying to answer it, but I'll limit it to one. What is the point? And I think this is others have said this too, right? Like especially Joe, I think. Like what are we achieving with the visualization in particular, right? Are folks just interested in the values that the variables are taking for like some process that they're running? In which case, like is like a dashboard or any sort of visualization the right method? Are they just inputting it into another, software service? And in which case, you don't need to go through that visualization aspect. So like, I'm very skeptical of a 1,000-dimensional visualization.
Yeah, I understand that. I think the problem is this is really what's used to determine how to run an entire refinery, and refineries are huge. So you're literally having like probably 70 reactors, and there's a temperature, a pressure, and a flow for each of those. Plus there's all the stuff you're putting in, which is probably like 25 different things. And then there's all the stuff you're getting out, which is probably 25 different things. So right there's probably 200 variables. But I agree. I think breaking down the actual problems, because it's not like everyone cares about certain aspects of it. So I think breaking it down makes it better. I agree.
I'll tell you the types of reports that I see that make my eyes bleed, and I saw one today actually. So I was crying a river of tears, of blood actually. No, but it was a table. It was like too many columns. It was like, what are you going to do with this? You know, it's just a lot of data, not a lot of information. And so, but some people like staring at tables. So I don't know. Some people like to watch the world burn, I guess. So what are you going to do when you look at a table, right? What are you looking for? So I don't know. I think you're right. Just reduce it down. I mean, this doesn't seem that complicated. It just seems like presenting as it is right now, presenting it as it is I wouldn't call it complicated. I would just call it like super annoying and probably like wouldn't yield any actionable results. People, I don't know, it's confusing, but I'll stop my rant. Thanks.
Joe, thank you. Vicky, has a final point to add on this. Navi, do you have a point to add to Avery's original question, or is it a new question?
I don't know the original question, but I'm just kind of adding on to the reporting piece, because my life does revolve around it quite a bit. Okay, I think the part that most people miss is, what do you care about, right? Like when I work with, I don't know, 40, 50 variables across different media channels, it adds up to a lot of variables. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. And when the question to ask is, most of the stakeholders have their 5 or 6 KPIs that they really care about, you know? So start with the end goal and then go backwards. Most of the times, I think what ends up happening is you start with that big spreadsheet or database. You want to throw everything in there and then see what that layout looks like and then cut it, you know, versus the other approach, say, hey, I only care about these 5 things. And just a different strategy of thinking about how to build about your dashboard is important. And I think a lot of companies don't do that enough at the forefront versus at the end. And that's why, you know, you spend months and months saying, hey, I only care about 4 things, you know.
Debbie, thank you so much. Let's go to Mikiko. Then after Mikiko, we'll go to Mark's question, and then after Mark's question, we'll go to Eric's question. Also, shout out to Tashi. Tashi, I haven't seen you in so long. Good to see you, man. Let's go to Mikiko for a final kind of point on this. Then we'll go to Mark's question.
Yeah, I mean, for better or worse, like if you have, so like that's what I was thinking. I'm like, could this be a dashboard where you have the different questions like broken out and like the different actions? And I guess to support Tom's, you know, monetization suggestions, sometimes like when you build something nice for like one business partner or key stakeholder, the other key stakeholders want it, but in a slightly different format, answering a slightly different question. And that's how you get a retainer or multi-project engagement. So I think it's also okay if you slim it down to like answering a core question, do like an absolutely bang up solid job on it, and then other people want it. So yeah. And also once you've like developed like the domain expertise in the business partnership, like with that first key stakeholder, then actually makes it easier to then deal with all the other key stakeholders.
Avery, hopefully that was helpful. If you got any follow-up questions, I can definitely add you to the end queue after we get to Eric's question. But great discussion, Avery. Thank you so much for kicking that off. And Mark is next. So Mark, go for it. By the way, if you're listening on YouTube or on LinkedIn, and you've got a question, please let me know. I'll go ahead and add your question into the queue. If you're watching on LinkedIn and you want to join on the live session, send me a message. I'll give you a link to the room. Mark, go for it.
Hey everyone, so I'm about to embark on a really fun project where I'm about to translate a whole bunch of business logic in one technology and move it to a new technology. And my key thing is, how can I ensure there's parity between both approaches? What gotchas should I be looking out for? Just looking for some general advice of making that transition. I've done something similar before as a whole entire team, and I played a small part, but now I'm like leading that part. And so if anyone's ever done like a migration of some sorts of data, what would you look out for? What are some kind of like landmines that you've seen so I can avoid those?
I see Joe and Matt in the corner there laughing because I'm sure this is something they've got experience with. So why don't you guys go for it? And if anybody wants to chime in, go ahead and just like that.
Do you want to take this one, Matt, into maybe in general sense?
Yeah, I mean, so Andy Petrella has this notion of data observability driven development. And so I think the core idea, I mean, there's a lot more to it than this, but it's the idea that you want to start testing your data right away. And so test the business logic in the source system and see if it at least corresponds to what you think the logic is, and then start building out in the new system, and then run tests as you do that development process. And so that allows you to proceed in a fairly agile manner and hopefully have something that makes sense at the end versus like trying to do a gigantic lift and shift and then finding tons of
I guess we can talk about maybe anti-patterns of migrations. How about that? Like that's well, I mean, so
real quick, that was really useful because I was about to actually do all my testing at the end. So thank you so much.
No. You should always do that at the beginning if you can. Yeah, for sure. It's like TDD, test-driven development, right? Like, exactly. You don't write your test after you write your code. The whole idea is to do it before, and you should, kind of begin with the end in mind. So anti-patterns for migrations. Let's talk about these for a bit, right? So we see these. We do migrations, right? We've seen a few of these. And so anti-patterns. So definitely anti-pattern number one, definitely lift and shift everything and one gigantic false swoop. That's a sure recipe for disaster. Definitely don't understand your dependencies. That's number two. Don't understand how anything relates to itself. Just blindly lift it and port everything over. Don't understand the cost mechanisms to the new thing that you're moving to. Just assume it's like the old one. Geez, what else would be an anti-pattern? Don't get anyone involved. Just blindly do it yourself or do it things after the fact and tell people you did it. What would be other things?
I think you've already covered some of these, but like the one about understanding the cost mechanisms. When you lift and shift, use exactly the same ingestion patterns in the new system use exactly the same like.
That's an anti-pattern, by the way. Yeah, don't do that. But yeah. Happy to answer questions offline, but those are some general things. Migrations are I don't know what they're always fun, I guess.
That's one way to put it.
Yeah, they're fun. Yeah, you'll have a lot of fun.
It is just exciting to get into new technology once you hit walls and you need it to do new interesting things.
Yeah. So you're gonna hit walls. So have like the proverbial airbag on your journey as well, because you will need it. It will deploy at some point. So. Migrations are one of these things that I'm sure we could talk about this for hours. We don't have enough time. So
I got a question then. Just for people like myself, and anybody who's listening. When you talk about a migration, right? Mark, you said business logic migration. To understand, like, what does that mean? What does that mean? What does that entail? Like, kind of just to conceptualize that for us.
Yeah, so I can't go into too many details, unfortunately, but to give a good idea, say for instance, you have your data and you're running some type of process to get the data into a certain format. Let's just say, for instance, like data engineering. You have like a machine learning model. You do some data engineering, right? You have a process to create those features. Shifting to a new technology that help you maybe scale better, doing that same exact kind of transformations. Or data prep or wherever it may be into another kind of format. And so the potential downfall is like I recreate all this logic, but I do it wrong or I miss something. And now we have two systems that don't match up. And downstream is just impacting a lot of things and the company catches on fire. Worst case scenario.
Yeah, I mean, don't want that to happen. So, yeah, I think what Matt said is I think absolutely correct. Like build in tests up front. Build in data quality tests. You could use maybe for data quality, use great expectations and just make sure as you're bringing in data that data is matching, right? Or Andy Petrella, he runs Kenzo. I mean, there's no shortage of data observability tools at this point. Big Eye Monte Carlo, whatever you want to use. I mean, they're all great, and Metaplane and so forth. I will say, like, just make sure you're doing this stuff early and often. I think this is actually the stage when you want to bake in a lot of your business logic into the form of tests or some sort of reliability checks before you start moving stuff in. Because what will happen, something will break, right? Something is not going to match. And as I said, your airbag will deploy. And so, making sure that you have these checks in place. Well, at least, it's a difference between, like, I guess, breaking a nail and going to the ER, if you know what I'm saying. So anything you want to add?
No, that's
great. Yeah, it's great. Yeah.
I'm just going to be so serious in that y'all just saved me so much because I was legit about to do the whole thing and then test at the end. And now I know that is bad.
Yeah, we're like the world's worst consultants. We should tell you, like, yeah, I'm doing a great job. Like, do that and you'll give us a call later. Nah, it's fine. So
one other thing I'd add is, and you're probably already doing this, but going back to the Andy pattern of like lifting and shifting everything, prioritize and like decide what actually should get moved. And you may find a lot of the other stuff that was in the old system, maybe you don't actually need, or maybe you need something slightly different in the new system.
Yep.
Also, a huge shout out to Abe from Superconductive, which owns Great Expectations. Go to my YouTube channel, just type in like Abe. I did a thing with Abe, Jimmy, and Matt Laza. We're talking about
nice
these type of issues. So I think you guys will enjoy that. Goes back when I was that comment, but I think it's still on my YouTube. So check that out. Anybody else have anything to add to Mark's question? If so, go ahead and let me know. Does not look like it. So let's go to, well, then anything to add? What, did you catch the question by any chance then? Oh yeah, then step away for a second. Mark, do you want to quickly rephrase that question and see if we can get Vince's perspective?
No, I heard I stuck around for the question. I mean, come on, I can't beat Joe. Joe's already got it covered.
There you go. Joe, thank you so much. So let's go ahead and let's jump to Eric's question. And then after Eric, Patrice is in the building. Patrice asked a question on LinkedIn regarding a post that been made, a video about the 7 mistakes that he made. I want to touch on that too. That's great. Joe, thanks for hanging out. Jonathan, thanks for hanging out. Appreciate you guys being here. By the way, Mark, Relo, if you guys want to jump in at any point, man, you guys just let me know. Everyone is welcome to participate. Just use like the raise hand icon, and I'll go ahead and put you guys into the queue. Eric, are you still here? Yes, you are.
I'm totally still here.
Go for it.
Okay, so this is a question about greedy versus, I guess, dynamic algorithms. So I have a system that is currently greedy, right? So it's gonna match people to, I guess I'll just call them consumers. It's gonna match a consumer to a partner if they're a good match. And let's just say it'll match them up to 3. And so it's gonna match a consumer to a partner up to three maximum. And you may be, potentially qualified to talk to 4, 5, or 6, but we're gonna cap it at 3. And so the way the algorithm works right now is it says, well, which 3 are the most beneficial to me right now? And it will match to that right away. But what we find is those partners have capacities and they'll hit them at different times of the day. And not all of those filters are the same, like, width, right? some are pretty narrow, and so they're going to catch a narrow slice of people, and some are wide. And so if we get to the end of the day and this wide filter got filled up early in the day, and there's only like a narrow filter left, we're going to have consumers who aren't going to be able to be matched to a partner because this wide filter that is redundant with this narrow filter was chosen just because it was more advantageous at the moment, rather than using some kind of other system, some kind of other algorithm to, I guess use probability to say, well, chances are pretty good given what we've seen in the past. We're going to fill this if we, hang tight. We're just going to put this off to the side and fill it and guess that it's going to be filled later. So I kind of thought about, what I'm trying to say is, okay, so what kind of like tool or algorithm or something can I use for that? I've been thinking about like Monte Carlo simulation of like what different days look like in order to, just kind of like simulate what that would look like to see how much of that problem exists, trying to quantify it right now. And then how to go about creating that more dynamically optimal algorithm rather than something that's more greedy.
Open up to anyone that has any insight or clarifying questions. I've got nothing at the moment. If anybody got any insights or
I'll jump in.
Yeah.
Ask a whole bunch. Nope, never mind. Mark, you saved.
Let's have a clarifying question because that seems like a very tough problem, and there's a lot of moving parts here, and I didn't really fully follow. And so, could you repeat? Like, I know there's this matching component of people, but where you lost me was like the wide versus narrow window,
like with the filters. Sure.
Yeah. Can you just explain that one piece, and I can hopefully maybe think of something, or Vin can.
Sure. Yeah, sure. So I work at LendingTree, right? So we're talking about people who, let's say it's somebody who wants to get a mortgage, and you might have a lender who says, I am willing to talk to people who make between $50,000 a year and $300,000 a year. And then you might have another lender that says, well, I only want people that make between $50,000 a year and $100,000 a year. So it's like a different, like this filter is going to catch a larger number of people than this filter is going to catch, just because its requirements are more stringent. Does that kind of make sense with the width thing? And so if somebody comes along who makes between 50 and 100,000, it's going to pick one of those two filters. And if it picks the wide filter, then let's say that one's full now, like it's a bucket and it's full. So it's going to be taken off the table. So somebody comes along later who makes more than $100,000, this filter might sit there unfilled. Going to be like, hey, I'm this, I could have been filled earlier and this one could have been filled, but instead only one got filled. And then somebody leaves with sad face emoji.
So what I'm getting from this is, and let me know if I'm correct, this seems like both a ranking and optimization problem at the same time, where you have to rank kind of like what's the best fit for a specific lender while also optimize across globally what will be the most matches. Would that seem correct?
Yeah, I think so. That's a really helpful split of ranking and optimization.
I've done my part. Thank you.
So real quick, like I'm still not understanding why the other buckets would not be filled. Would the other buckets not be filled because it sounded like overlaps in like the conditions?
Yeah, so let's see here. Think of how I can explain it. So it's like this is oversimplified because I'm just talking about one tiny condition, right? But if we're gonna rank those, the buckets, we're gonna rank the buckets to say, well, these are those top 3 buckets that we should give you. But it may be that there are, let's say, 4 buckets that the person fits in, and we're going to give them those top 3 buckets based on whatever like internal ranking algorithm we have. We're going to give them those top 3, but like if we change that ranking algorithm to like give more weight to something else, then it might actually grab 1, 2, and 4 and save 3 for later, because it knows, like, well, every day at like 9 p.m. after everything, all the other buckets are full, we tend to get people who come in and will fit that bucket. So like, yes, they could be filled earlier, but we're gonna hold it for the late crowd. But how do we like choose? How do we adjust that to think about that and look further ahead than just like our local optimum?
Mark, I see your hands up. You want to go before or after them?
I just have another clarifying question that'll make things a lot easier for me to understand. Does this need to happen in real time, or is it batch predictions or batch kind of matching?
Real time.
Real time. That's tricky. Now I understand why you're talking about the Monte Carlo aspect of like, what's the probability of like this person being filled later?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm curious what others have to say, and then I'll collect my thoughts.
Let's hear from Ben. Ben, go for it. By the way, shout out to Vivian. Vivian, I did not shout you out earlier. Good to see you again. Go for it, Ben.
Yeah, I mean, Mark's kind of onto it. You need multiple models. One of them is going to be a demand forecasting model where you look at just likelihood. You know, it sounds like income's a big deal. Look at, I'm sure credit score is a big deal. I'm sure, you know, there's some other features, but pick out your biggest and segment your audience. You know, so the first thing you want to do is segment out from a banking standpoint or from a lender standpoint. You want to have a segment of lenders and get rid of the windows. That way you're no longer worried about a lender having a window. You now have a segment of windows, and there are these lenders behind them. Now you don't have to worry about the windows anymore, because that's the part that's going to be the most complicated to do in real time, is to try to, you know, play like almost dominoes with, you know, matching a person to a window. But what if the window is closing later? And so, I mean, I would, you know, segment customers, segment lenders, and then hide both of them behind the most important features so that you can forecast demand with respect to things like income. So you're not worried, like I said, so you're not worried about the individual windows with respect to a lender. Now you know how many slots you have for each one of the segments, and you can begin matching that way. And if you forecast demand, saying that later in the day, we for some reason have more of these people show up, which is kind of like, that's an oddball problem to have. Like people with high income show up at some time, or people with low income show up at a different time. That's weird. I never thought about that. But that's what I would do, is really hide it behind segmentation, because then the windows part kind of goes away a little bit, and you can fit things into, like, you have a certain number of parking slots almost, or parking spaces, you know, inside of a parking lot. And then you're not worried about which lender, you're just worried about how many parking spots do I have? And, you know, how many cars do I get at 6 p.m. that fit into this, you know, cars, semis, I don't know. Hopefully that metaphor makes sense, but create multiple models. One of them's behind forecasting, maybe even supply. One's forecasting demand. Do two that segment each end of it, and then figure out how to match with the optimization of as many people as possible get matched. And as soon as the business sees that, they're going to change your objective to maximizing your revenue. So just be ready for that, because that's going to be the next piece that they'll end up saying, well, hey, if you optimized it for revenue, would we be matching differently? And just, like I said, be ready for that.
Cool, that's really helpful. And yeah, the parking lot thing is like a way better analogy, because it's kind of like, I mean, except it's not like one person to like one parking space. They can have more than one. But the idea is, at the end of the day, how many cars did we want to get in, and how many parking spots do we have available throughout the day or whatever given time? And are we able to like please as many people on both sides of the equation as possible?
But realize it's not one parking lot. Like, there are several different parking lots. That's why I'm using the parking lot analogy. Like, one parking lot fits a, you know, mini subcompact car. The next parking lot fits a monster truck, you know, because in Nevada, you always have to have parking spots allowable for the 1 foot lift kits that we seem to be fond of out here. And then you have, you know, semi parking. And so it's not so much, and the way you're thinking about it now is this parking lot has 4 slots for compact cars, 2 slots for midsize, 1 slot for a semi, but separate that out. So pretend it's basically 1 parking lot for semis and just group everything in there. That's why I'm saying kind of segment it in that way. So you have a parking lot, not a particular company has this capacity, but we over the course of the day have this much capacity altogether. So 1 parking lot is 1 segment, and that can handle 1, and then just match it up to a customer segment where the car that can fit in the parking spot is matched up with the parking spot, instead of worrying about having a certain number of spots per lender. Like I said, just break it out by the segment, and you're kind of hiding customers and lenders behind the segments. That way, because what you're trying to do is match the two and make them the same, not just matching people to lenders, but you're trying to make the segmentation on both sides equivalent, and then figure out how many, demand on one side, supply on the other side, so that at the beginning of the day, you kind of have a picture of what you have available and what you're most likely to have happen, so that you know how many slots and how to, it's hopefully that metaphor that I'm just killing right now is making sense.
Good. Parking lots. Are they within a parking lot? It's like a meta lot now, or you need to
that's trademark, so I can't use meta lot. But yeah, that's trademark. I can't do that. So I would say a pseudo lot. How about a pseudo lot?
All right.
Mark, let's hear from you. In the meantime, while Mark gets ready here, I found this article that might be helpful. It's a Medium publication. It's data machine learning marketplace optimization at Upwork, and kind of the issue they're dealing with sounds similar to what's been discussed now. They're breaking down the marketplace into homogeneous segments with predictable behavior, trying to understand optimal pricing, which kind of, I guess there's some analogies that are doing there, and then quantify and predict supply and demand. So it might be useful. Hopefully there's something you can abstract away from that. That's helpful.
Thank you.
Mark, go for it.
So I have another clarifying question. How important is time in this? Do you care that a lender or a customer will leave if it takes too long to match? Or is it just a matter that, is it more important to have a correct match, or to have a correct match within a certain time window? Or is that even not a problem at this point?
Time's definitely important. Although if I had to choose between time and something that's suboptimal, for the company, but gets the customer what they need, that's what I would choose. But time is always important when you're waiting for a screen to load or something like that. We're all impatient.
Cool. And by time, I don't mean the app loading quickly, but I mean time from request of lending to actually signing and getting a loan through LendingTree.
So the LendingTree isn't a lender. We connect people with lenders, and so once they're connected, our job is for the most part done, because they're going to now they're going to be working with the lender to sign and get the loan and everything, and it differs by product how long that takes and stuff. For some people that's super important, and for other people it's obviously you care, but it's not as a deal breaker or whatever.
Okay, because I'm more so thinking about the optimization component. And I'm just thinking back to my public health modeling class where we did healthcare clinic queue optimization. And the idea being is you have this supply side and this demand side. And the analogy that my professor gave was this bathtub where your supply or your demand is the water going into the bathtub, and your let me take a step back. Your supply is the rate in which the water can drain from the bathtub, and your demand is the water that's going into the bathtub. And so the idea being is with those two components, you can figure out one, how long it will take for something to go through, but also the probability of people jumping out of the queue and just being this is too long for me to be in, and thus reducing the amount of people. And so the reason why I'm thinking that's important is again, we're trying to optimize for trying to determine what's the best amount. I think the key one of the key things when thinking like a mental model of this is like, how long is someone willing to wait before they go to your competitor to like get their loan, especially if they're shopping around. You know, they might go to like LendingTree and some other lending service or their own bank, right? How long would it take before someone's like, I don't want to do this through this platform anymore? And so I'm happy to send you references because there's actually a whole calculation where you can legit calculate the supply, the demand, and the jump out rate. And considering that you're already probably collecting all this, I imagine you have all the variables to determine this, but that can be another piece. And I'll happy to send that to you on the side. And then another thing top of mind is going back to like Ben's kind of like bucket things for the ranking side of things. For the ranges, I know you're like, there's probably like a wide range is like by lender, but if you can bucket them potentially by like 0 to 100,000, 100,000 to 200,000, you get the idea, like different buckets of like the range. And I'm curious if you can build like an individual model for each bucket, whereas like the probability of a user, being accepted for a loan for that bucket. And so you'll have like a range of like probabilities, and those could be your features that you use to determine your ranking.
Well, that's interesting. That's a cool angle I hadn't considered at all. I'm gonna write that down. So probability of a user.
Yeah, and so my mind.
So you need the probability for that user for every single bucket that is like relevant to them, right?
Yeah, and not even relevant. It can be ones that are not relevant, and the probability will just be 0. But essentially, the idea being like, I don't know your underlying distribution, but like I'm just random easy model understanding. Like you fit a logistic regression 0, 1. Would they get the loan? Yes or no? Not saying you use logistic regression, but the idea like you get a probability out of that. And then from there, you'll have essentially a whole bunch of features, and it's condensed down from all these different factors to, these sub buckets. And this is mainly just how I interpreted what Ben was talking about. So Ben, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you said Mark nailed it.
Nabi's got a clarifying question here as well. Go for it.
Oh no, I was just asking about when are you talking about, this is all like first party data?
Yeah.
Okay. So there's no like ad server or any media third party data that you're using?
No.
So your key
It's just data,
KPI is like, what's your key KPI to optimize on? I still don't.
So in this case, like we were talking about with, just go back to like people and buckets, is just saying at the end of the day, how many people, so like, let's say that right now in a day, if we have 100 people come to our site and we have 100 potential buckets, but they're not all like the same size. Let's say that 90 people end up getting into a bucket. So we have 90 buckets that are filled. So we have 10 people who didn't get a bucket and 10 buckets that didn't get a person. And we wanted to get it to be 100 people, 100 buckets. Everybody got matched. Everybody got matched up. And so it's that, I guess, ratio of people who fall to the floor who aren't matched.
Okay. Sorry, I don't have an answer. I was just curious.
All right.
Good question.
Yeah. Any other, I guess, inputs or insights to share with Eric? Eric, was that helpful? Were you able to kind of maybe get some vocab words that you could take and then do some searches with?
Yeah. I think that's been like the biggest thing is I have kind of some ideas, but only like 2 or 3 words to describe them. So getting some ideas and understanding the new construct of Schrodinger's parking lot is really helpful. But yeah, definitely. Thanks for the ideas and the words.
Mark, go for it. I can't remember, Mark, if your hand is up from before. I forgot to put it down, but okay.
That was a complete mistake, but something that popped in my head as well is thinking about matching, looking at matching algorithms for like propensity score matching. That may be the wrong path because it's a different problem. But the idea of like the step before you kind of do your analysis of propensity score matching is the matching component. You have all these different covariates and you're trying to get it down to like a single variable to describe all your covariates. Maybe a keyword that might lead you to something that's useful. So like one of them, I'm blanking on like Mahalanobis distances and stuff like that. Crazy
I totally
stuff.
wanted to find a reason to use that because like, what the heck is a Mahalanobis?
I'm not saying that's the correct thing to go, but it's more so a keyword to figure out how are other people considering all these different variables and matching to someone. I don't think it's the right solution for your thing, but I think it might give you some clues on what's potentially out there and like what literature people are referencing. I will also send you that.
Sweet, thank you.
I used Mahalanobis distance once when I was doing a clustering problem, trying to find the segments of different clusters. That was a long time ago though. Does not look like there's any other questions or input here. Is there any other, I guess, just any questions taking a new direction? Eric, hopefully that was helpful for you. Great questions, great discussions today too.
I've got a critical community question.
Yeah, please.
I'm feeling bad for my brother Harpreet because he's been out of his man cave for quite a while now. So what's the ETA on getting back to your main man cave?
Yeah, dude, these guys, dude, first of all, they're taking their sweet ass time, right? So they finally got the floors in, but let me tell you how they went about this, right? Not only is the basement incapacitated and out of whack, when they came to put all the flooring in, they put it right in the middle of our kitchen. There's boxes upon boxes of luxury vinyl planking, just blocking an exit and entryway to the house, blocking my fridge. And so we've been having to like navigate around this the entire week. And I'm like messaging the person, like, what are you doing? Like our life already is like inconvenienced. You're making it even worse. I don't know when this can be done. They've put all the drywall up, the floors are in, they just gotta paint, they just gotta fix the bathroom. I gotta get all my shit back. Soon, I hope. But I will tell you this, there's some extra renovations that I've done in my office that are going to look pretty cool on camera once I get to it. I'm excited for it. But yeah, until then.
So I've been explaining to people in the chat that we're down to our last few chickens, and I built my chicken coop in hopes that when the family got burnt out on taking care of chickens, it could become my new man cave. So there it is. Oh, sorry for my shake. There it is. 200 square feet, but I got to prettify it. It looks pretty bad. And I know it'd be hard to believe, but it's got a ton of chicken poop in it. So I got to fix that, insulate it.
Yeah, clean that out. That could not be healthy to breathe, for sure. Actually, Patrice, I want to get to Patrice's question because she had a question for Vin. That was a really good question from LinkedIn. So let's get to that. Then I guess we could begin to wrap it up after that. But go for it, Patrice.
Thanks, Harpreet. And thank you, Vin, for the 7 career mistakes video. I always appreciate those because there's at least one thing in them that's general enough to remind me that even as a mid-career switcher, there is something I know that's worth knowing as I go into something completely new. So my question is off of that, if there's any mistakes that you wish you had made and didn't make, or if there's maybe an 8th story or an example that you cut that might fit into a director's cut, if you have more thoughts along those lines of things that might be good for others to know and skip over and make more interesting or educational mistakes than some of the ones that you've encountered in your career.
Real quick for everyone listening, go to Vin's YouTube channel, The High ROI Data Scientist. He released a video just a couple of days ago, 7 career mistakes. If you can real quick, just rattle off those 7 mistakes, and then get to Patricia's question, I think that will provide a lot more context for folks who have not yet been able to check that out.
Yeah, I wish I'd have told people to. I wish I'd have told some people off in more blunt terms. That's a mistake I wish I'd have made. Like, you don't realize the power of pushback, and I kind of touched on pushback and telling people that, you know, that's do your job. But I wish I had told more leaders to go straight to hell. That is the mistake and good thing that I wish I'd have done. You know, like I said, it would have taught me a lot about how easily pushed off their point most mid-level managers are. They're not really that good at their jobs. They're just really good at sounding assertive and sounding like they know what they're talking about. And I wish I had much earlier in my career just said, okay, you're full of it. No, that's not what's happening. We're not going to do that. Here's what's going to happen instead. And that's, you know, if I'd have done that, I would have had even more successful projects, because a lot of the early mistakes that I made were listening to people because they had a cool title, not because they knew what they were talking about. So that's kind of the one side, is I would have learned a lot more through pushback. But the other side is, as a leader, there were a couple of moments that I remember where I should have said no. And that's the big takeaway for me. Like, I remember laying one person off, and I thought I had won a big victory because they had asked me to give them two names. And I said, well, how about if I just close this open position that I have? And, you know, that's one name. And I thought like I was winning that battle. In reality, I should have just told them, no, I'm not picking anybody. I need everybody on my team. You want to fire somebody, fire me. You know, if I had pushed back like that and said no, I would have, like, that would be one thing I would not regret, because I look back at that and I was at a company that was profitable, making money. They were not hurting for cash in any way, shape, or form. They were in no danger of going out of business. And they were asking us to lay off people so that they could boost the share price. And I should have just pushed back and said no. So those, you know, for those two reasons, I wish I had earlier on in my career had a little bit, I don't know about backbone, but you know what I'm saying. I wish I'd have been more articulate. I wish I'd have been more willing to push back and say, look, no, that's not working. Because like I said, I think, you know, on the one side, I would be happier with myself as an early and mid-career leader than I am looking back now. You know, because there was also a phone call that I made to somebody that was, you know, was on a weekend, and he was being asked to come in, but he had family stuff. And I remember my director dragging me into her office and saying, no, you need to call this person and get him to come in. And I should have said, the hell I will. You want to do it yourself. That should have been my response. And that's why, you know, those are the moments I look back on as a leader and say, I was not a good leader. That was bad as a leader. I should have, even young, pushed back. And so that's the, you know, if I had one more story, that would have been the one, is tell people to go to hell. You'll be so surprised. The majority of people will just look at you for a few seconds like you're supposed to be upset and be, you know, contrite and say you're sorry. And when you don't, when you double down, they will back off because they're wrong and they know it.
Thanks for that. One more story. Can I throw in one more follow-up?
Yeah, go for it.
I'm wondering, so one of the things that's most compelling about the 7 career mistakes that you put together is how far past those you've landed. And that's what makes them interesting, right? So anybody on LinkedIn can write about 7 mistakes they made. And it's not everybody's 7 mistakes are interesting, right? So do you have thoughts, or maybe they are, but people don't, so the question I'm thinking about, I don't know if I probably didn't phrase that quite the best way, but what I'm thinking about is, do you have a way of thinking about, like, is there is there a place that you have to have reached, or is it like the environment you're in? When do you get to start talking about your mistakes and having those land alongside your confidence in your achievements, rather than them coming across as, oh, this person hasn't achieved?
That's really interesting. And I'm going to answer that one, but also, like, I'm looking at the chat, and yes, as a guy, way easier. I have to 100% say this. As a guy, this is easier. And so I would almost say, if you're a woman and you don't feel like you can do that kind of pushback to your boss, you're in the wrong place. Like, if someone pushes back against me, I'm going to listen. I trust my people. I don't care who it is pushing back on me. If somebody tells me to go to hell, I'm going to think to myself, I must have said something out of line, because that's, it's a leadership style where you trust your people. And if one of your people says you're out of line, like, you just, whoa, it's time to reset and reevaluate. But that's not everyone's leadership style. And if you're not in that position, that's a bad, it's a big red flag that you're probably in a more toxic environment than you think you are. There are these little things. If you are a woman, if you are somebody who is in one of the disadvantaged groups or underrepresented groups, and you feel like, if I told my boss to go to hell, they would just fire me on the spot. But if a guy said that, he'd be cool. You're in a more toxic environment than you think you are. That's like, your boss should make it a comfortable thing to say, that's wrong. You're wrong. We're not going to do this. Your boss should be asking you before making like blanket statements that might be wrong. That should be like step one, is your boss asks you for input and then makes and this is what happens. Every once in a while, you can't do that as a leader. So it's not 100% of the time, but I'd say 80 at least. There should be a conversation first before this is what must happen. But yeah, I want to acknowledge that this is dudes have this a whole lot easier than women do. But that being said, that's a red flag. Like, you're in a toxic environment if you're worried about that, and you shouldn't be. But to answer the question about when can you admit this, you don't realize how much of a power move this is, to be, in any spot and say, oh yeah, I did that wrong. I was so stupid. And so here's what I did right. Like, that is the power move. I watched somebody who was talking to Davos, and he was talking about an investment that he had absolutely blundered. And the person who was interviewing him, called him on it and said, yeah, this is one of your biggest, or he was talking about how it was the biggest bet for him. And they said, yeah, that's down so much and so much percent. And he goes, yeah, it is. Like, power move. Yeah, you're right. And that was like, there's so much strength in being wrong. And when somebody tries to get at you by pointing out a time that you were wrong, where you just stop and go, yeah, you're right. There's so much strength in being able to be wrong and to be able to say, oh yeah, no, I made that mistake. Because now everyone looks at you as human, but also at the same time, you're allowing people at a junior level to be human. It's okay. And that is the power move of it all, is everyone in that room is messed up. Everyone. If you're in a room with a CEO, that CEO has made some pain mistakes. And when you're the only one in the room who says, yeah, no, I did that. Oh, yeah. And you own it. Like, you are all of a sudden, you've gone from where you are now to possibly the strongest personality in the room, because you just opened yourself up and said, yeah, I've made mistakes. I'm imperfect. You said the thing everybody else is afraid to say, but you've also revealed the truth that everyone in that room has failed. And if they haven't done anything very interesting. If all you're doing is making cheeseburgers, yeah, you probably never failed. Good job. But if you're trying to make like the best burger on earth, you've made some really bad ones in the attempt to make that great one. So there's, and there's a difference there. So no, be wrong. be that person that says, yeah, I failed that one time. Don't list all your failures. Like, don't go too deep. Don't make yourself look bad. But yeah, from time to time, just acknowledge failure, especially if you see people in the room who are afraid of it, who are worried about admitting that something went wrong, because that's another sign of toxic cultures. When people are afraid to say, I messed up, be the one that does it first.
Thank you. I appreciate you on that.
Absolutely love that. Then it's interesting, like literally just started the 3rd chapter of Adam Grant's book, Think and Get, listening to it on Audible here. And the 3rd chapter is called The Joy of Being Wrong, the thrill of not believing everything you think. So I'm excited to listen to that chapter and kind of tie it back to this discussion. Let's go to Makiko, and then after Makiko, we'll go to Navi. Makiko, go for it. And by the way, last call for questions. If you guys got questions, let me know. I'll add those questions to the queue. Otherwise, we'll wrap up after Navi here.
Yeah, I think there's like 3 points. Like, I think, so the stories that you see on LinkedIn where they just like go viral, where like someone talks about how they, they made mistakes and all that. I think there's kind of 2 reasons for that, right? One is because a lot of times it's how they're framing it. So they're not framing it and saying like, yeah, I totally screwed up and I'm a loser. A lot of times they're framing it in a like, this is a situation, this is like what happened, and here's like kind of the learnings that I am providing you, the audience, with that. So I do think like there is a way to like frame that story. And I think that's going to be true no matter what, like whether it's out on public and social media, whether it's like in one-on-one interactions, and all that. And I think in more of like the local conversations, like if you're handling a project and you screw up on something, but you don't admit it, that's over time kind of just erodes your relationship with your business partners. But once again, like there is a way to frame it, but in a way that is like both, one, it's positive, like this is what I learned, what I experienced, and this is kind of like my sort of gift to you. But also like I'm a earnest person who wants to work with you, who wants to be a partner to you. And I think people are always sort of receptive to that. I feel like as women, we do have to have that conversation in a certain way, and we do have to frame it. And I do think, so for example, like one of my teammates, right, she's a Black woman, right? And she has a lot of stress and pressures because she does feel that she has to perform at a much higher level than her peers. Because the reality is that for the same actions, it might be taken differently. And to Vin's point, right, I think that's also a comment about the environment that someone could be in, is that if people don't acknowledge that kind of bias too, that can also kind of lead to like actions being taken taken differently. Something that she does really effectively is she always it's the way she frames it in like a learning, and like, for example, when, not saying that she hasn't even made any mistakes as far as I've seen, but she's always turned something into like a learning story. And I find that personal very inspiring. And I feel like whenever I've made a mistake and it's been received okay, it's because I found a way to kind of talk about it, but also to say that this is what I'm going to do differently as a result. So I do think like there's a lot of different factors at play. Like I know for me, I do feel very nervous about talking about my mistakes because I do feel like to a certain degree, it does hit my credibility because I'm a female, especially like when I'm as a female content creator, I feel like I have to be very careful when I say or do certain things. But I would say that in terms of being authentic and also being unafraid to assert like, hey, I still have value. Like my insight that I gained as a result of this experience can help you, can help other people. I still feel very strongly about that,
Thank you.
Let's go to Navi and then Mark.
This is a very touchy topic, because although in theory, I think what Wynn's saying is great. in application of it, I don't think we have the same liberties as some of you have. And I've done that quite a few times, the approach of go to hell and no, and I can't do it. And there are places where I have done that and been successful, and there are places that I have done that and not been successful. And the number of times I have been successful is far less than the number of times that I've failed. And it has nothing to do with me operating any differently. It simply has to do with whether my boss and his boss had my back, which is why I've written a few posts about that. When we talk about Judge Jackson's hearing, right? Like, she's the smartest one in the room, like hands down, right? It doesn't matter, right? She needed the Cory Booker. She needed a couple more white guys to say, yeah, she's right. You can't change that room. You can maybe think about, hey, I work in this company and I have my boss's back, but maybe his boss doesn't have your back, and maybe his hands are tied. I've been with clients where I've said, I'm sorry, I can't do it. It's unrealistic. You're asking me to do something I can't do. And there are times my boss will say, yeah, I'm right. Because I'm not just saying it because I have a spite or anything. I just can't deliver at the pace that they're asking me to. So in theory, when I would really love for that world to be, but as a woman, as a brown woman, I don't get to say that a lot, which is unfortunate, but I hope it's better in the next few decades, which is also another reason that I post on LinkedIn a lot, because I want people to know me before they know me, Yeah. So yeah, I agree with you that if you're in a place where you can't say that, it's a toxic place, and I haven't lasted those places because, I'm still going to say what I'm going to say. And, so it's not as black and white as it is for maybe some of you guys who are lucky.
Thanks so much, Navi, for sharing. Patrice, I saw you're unmuted there. If you want to chime in before we get to Mark, go for it.
Oh, I was just saying thanks, Navi.
Mark, go for it. Mark, you are muted.
I am muted. I was actually going to talk about the whole manager having your back versus not, but I think Navi said that way better than I could regarding that. And just one thing I wanted to note, though I can't identify the struggles of being a woman within the workplace, especially in tech, being a Black male, there are some or identify as Black male, there are some things that I can and cannot do. But I think for me, what I really want to highlight is working in my current job at Humu has been so transformational for me, because I've had a lot of that, like my parents instilling in me, like you have to work 2 times as hard just to get just enough, right? Or even growing up, I experienced a lot of racism in high school and stuff like that, where like I was told I wasn't smart enough because of the color of my skin. Things like that really stick with you. And so like I've operated in the workplace with those kind of baggage in a way for that. And so coming into my current role where psychological safety is like so upheld, not only between me and my manager, but our team and the company as a whole, I've never experienced that before. And the amount of freedom that I'm able to experience through this is literally the first job I've ever been able to work and just focus on the work and not about the politics and optics of things. And it's absolutely wild. And part of me, maybe this may be naive, but like I don't want to go back. Like I don't want to, like it feels like a hard line for me now. Like I need a manager that supports me and gets this. And a big reason why I stay at Humu as well is because of this. It's so hard to find. And my concern going into my career is like, can I replicate this with other jobs? And I actually don't know, because it's just so novel. But it's like, now I feel like I just can't go back. Like I can't imagine going back to a job and being scared to say what's really on my mind or give feedback. So it's I really appreciate this conversation.
Thanks for sharing those thoughts. I actually had kind of the opposite of experience early in my career. I had the kind of experience you're having now. And it was actually much later that I realized, oh, this is how many different kinds of work environments there are. And this is how rare that actually was. But it's not the only place. There's at least at least a few more out there.
Excellent topics. Thanks so much for bringing that up, Patrice. This was a great discussion. See if there's any final words, final questions. Does not look like it. Y'all, thank you so much for hanging out. We'll go ahead and start wrapping this up. Definitely appreciate all y'all being here. Great episode today. Great conversations. Don't forget to tune in to the podcast. Had some great episodes released in the last couple of weeks. This week was with Jeremy Adamson, talked about leading data science teams. And week before was with Nick Singh. Coming up though, I've got interviews in the next couple of weeks that are pretty cool. Next week is with the gentleman from One Salting, Jonathan Lee and I forgot the guy's name, damn it. But One Salting, that's who's gonna be there. So definitely check that out. Shout out to Makiko for breaking 1,000 subscribers on her channel. That's crazy. I've been doing my thing for 2 years and I only have 1,000 subscribers. Makiko's out here doing it just recently and still crushing it. Great job, Makiko. Yeah, so episodes, the gentleman from One Salting next week. After that, Dr. Laura Pence. Laura Pence is she's from the Spartan race. She's like the one of the chief scientists or whatever. But it was a great conversation. Enjoyed talking to her. Y'all take care. Have a great rest of the weekend. Appreciate y'all being here. I'm about to end this on some Sidney Musiala music because, rest in peace, Sidney Musiala. I'm grateful for the music you put out, and thank you so much for all that. Y'all take care. Have a great rest of the afternoon. Rest of the evening. Remember, you got one life on this planet. Why not try to do something big? Hey, everyone. ਮੂੰਹਾਂ ਉੱਤੇ ਰੱਖਦੇ ਆ ਚੁੱਪ ਬੱਲੀਏ ਸਕਸੈਸ ਰਹਿੰਦੀ ਸ਼ਹਿਰ ਵਿੱਚ ਸ਼ੋਰ ਕਰਦੀ ਸਾਡਾ